The late autumn sun, weak and pale, had long since bled out over the city skyline, leaving the kitchen bathed in the artificial glow of the pendant light above the island. Elara sat on a stool, her hands wrapped around a mug of chamomile tea that had gone cold. She watched the delicate clock on the oven tick from 7:59 to 8 o'clock, the soft click of punctuation mark in the quiet apartment. He'd said by 7:30 for sure that morning, his voice muffled by his toothbrush, his eyes already scanning the blueprint rolled under his arm. Outside, a key scraped in the lock, a sound that once sent a flutter of anticipation through her, a prelude to shared wine and traded stories of the day. Now it just signaled an ending to the waiting. The door swung open, bringing in a gust of cool, city-scented air, and Leo, his shoulders dusted with a faint drizzle. His familiar sandalwood cologne, usually a comforting anchor, tonight smelled like distance, like hours spent in a climate-controlled office far from their home. "Hey you," he said, his voice a mix of warmth and weariness. He dropped his heavy leather satchel, a briefcase masquerading as a messenger bag, with a thud that echoed in the quiet space. He offered a smile, but it didn't quite reach his eyes, which held the distant, focused gleam of unsolved problems. God, what a day. The Henderson project is an absolute beast. The client changed the entire west facade concept at 4 o'clock. He moved to kiss her temple, his lips cool against her skin. Elara didn't lean into the gesture. "You missed dinner," she said, her voice quieter than the hum of the refrigerator. She gestured to the 2 covered plates on the counter, a silent testament to her effort. "The coke oven is reconstituted." He winced, running a hand through his disheveled hair. I know. I'm sorry. I texted." He pulled out his phone as if to produce evidence, a modern-day alibi. "You did," she acknowledged. The message had been a single line, received at 6:45, running late. "Don't wait." It was the "don't wait" that had stung the most, the casual assumption that her time was the flexible variable in their equation. "But you said this week would be lighter. You promised we'd actually have a meal together." "This is the lighter week, Elle," he sighed, sinking onto the stool opposite her, the weight of the world seeming to press him down. "This commission, it's the kind of project that defines a career. You know that." His tone was pleading, willing her to understand the monumental importance of his absence. And she did understand. Intellectually, she was proud of him. But her heart, sitting alone in the lengthening shadows for the 3rd time that week, told a different story. It spoke of a partnership slowly tilting off its axis, where his ambitions were solid, immovable monuments, and their shared life was the shifting sand around them. The trust that had once been a given, the trust that they were equal partners, that their time together was sacred, that a promise was a covenant, was no longer a seamless wall. She could feel the drafts coming in through hairline fractures she couldn't even see. "I know it's important," she finally said, meeting his tired gaze. "But so is this." Her gesture encompassed the cold plates, the quiet apartment, the space between them. The words hung there, fragile and heavy. Leo looked at her, then at the uneaten food, and for a fleeting moment, she saw a shadow of recognition cross his face, the dawning, uncomfortable realization that a foundation can crack from the inside, from the constant, imperceptible stress of neglected weight. Then he blinked, and it was gone, replaced by the practical need to solve the immediate problem. "Let me just heat this up," he said, reaching for a plate, already moving on to the next task, missing the chance to shore up the very ground beneath them. Elara had allowed herself to hope. The morning of their anniversary dawned clear and crisp, a perfect golden October day that felt like a promise. She moved through her routine with a quiet, humming joy, choosing her emerald green dress, the one Leo had said made her eyes look like sea glass, with deliberate care. She even lit the expensive sandalwood candle he liked, letting its familiar scent blend with the aroma of fresh coffee, a sensory tapestry of their life together. Today, she told herself, the 3rd person in their marriage, his work, would be politely, but firmly, shown the door. The little Italian trattoria, al dente, was a time capsule of their early love. The same red-checkered cloths, the same Chianti bottles dripping with wax, the same corner table where he'd nervously spilled a glass of water on their first date. She arrived first, as she always had, enjoying the pleasant tension of waiting for him. The waiter, an older man named Giovanni who had served them for years, gave her a knowing, avuncular smile. "Anniversary, see? He is a lucky man." She blushed, feeling the old magic stir. 7 o'clock, the reservation time, came and went. She ordered a glass of Sangiovese, telling herself he'd gotten stuck in traffic, that a last-minute email had detained him. By 7:30, the glass was empty, and the restaurant's lively buzz began to feel like a mockery of her solitude. Giovanni refilled her water glass with a sympathetic glance that was somehow worse than impatience. She texted, "Here at our table. All okay?" Her thumb hovered over the send button before adding a heart emoji, a tiny flag of optimism. His reply took 15 minutes. She watched the 3 pulsing dots on her screen with a sinking heart. "Leo, emergency client call. International. I am so sorry. Can't get out of it. Rain check. I'll make it up to you, I promise." The word promise on the screen seemed to blur and pixelate, losing all meaning. It was a ghost of a word, hollowed out by overuse. A rain check on their anniversary. She stared at the text, the clinical blue light illuminating the hurt on her face in the dim restaurant. The emergency, she knew, was likely real. But the pattern was the true betrayal. He had chosen, once again, to stand with the urgent rather than honor the important. Johnny approached, his expression gentle. "Would the signora like to order? Perhaps some bruschetta while she waits." "No," Elara said, her voice strangely calm. "I won't be staying." She settled the bill, the act of pulling out her credit card feeling like a final, formal severance of the evening's intent. She avoided Giovanni's eyes, feeling a hot shame that belonged to Leo but was now hers to carry. She walked out, leaving behind the untouched bread basket, a monument to her naive faith. The cab ride home was a silent blur of streaking city lights. She kept her composure, a hard, cold shell forming around the messy hurt inside. When she let herself into the apartment, the scene that greeted her was a fresh wound. Leo was on the couch, his laptop glowing on the coffee table, a half-eaten container of takeout sushi beside him. His tie was loosened, his sleeves rolled up. He looked up, and his face lit with a relieved, self-congratulatory smile. "Elara, there you are. I'm so glad you're back," he said, closing the laptop with a decisive click. "Look, I managed to wrap the call up way faster than I thought. I figured you'd still be at the restaurant, but they said you'd left. Did you get my text?" He was pleased. He thought he had salvaged the night. The sheer, staggering disconnect between his perception and her reality sucked the air from the room. Elara didn't remove her coat. The emerald fabric felt like a costume now. "You didn't wrap it up, Leo," she said, her voice low and terribly even. "You stood me up. On our anniversary. At our place." His smile faltered, replaced by a flash of defensive confusion. "It wasn't intentional. It was a work emergency. You know how this industry is." He spread his hands, an architect presenting an unforgiving blueprint. The cold shell around her cracked. "It's always work, Leo." The words erupted, sharp and scalding, carried on months of pent-up silence. "Your work is the third person in this marriage, and it's the only one you're truly committed to. It gets your best hours, your focused attention, your problem-solving. I get your leftovers and your apologies." She took a step forward, her composure shattering. "I can't trust your word anymore. I can't trust that you'll be where you say you'll be. I can't trust that we matter more than a client's whim." The word trust landed in the space between them not as an accusation, but as a verdict. It was a diagnosis for a sickness they had both been ignoring. Leo's face went ashen, the last of his defensive justification evaporating under the stark, brutal truth of it. He looked from her anguished face to the takeout container, to his closed laptop, the tools of his neglect, and for the first time, he seemed to truly see the wreckage he had been too busy to notice. He had not just missed a dinner. He had broken something fundamental, and the sound of it shattering finally, deafeningly, reached his ears. The days that followed were not filled with shouting. The fight had been a firework, a brilliant, terrifying burst of color and noise that left behind a deeper, more profound darkness. Their home became a museum of quiet. They moved through the rooms with the careful, muted steps of curators preserving a fragile, broken exhibit. Conversations, when they happened, were functional and brittle, reduced to the bare logistics of shared existence. The dishwasher is finished. Your mother called about Sunday. I'll be late tomorrow. Each sentence was a small, cold stone placed in the space between them, building a wall. Elara retreated into her art studio, a sunlit room that now felt like a bunker. She attacked blank canvases with slashes of angry vermilion and deep, bruised purples, painting not landscapes or portraits, but emotions so raw they had no literal form. The scent of turpentine and linseed oil became her new perfume, replacing the ghost of a sandalwood cologne in her space. She found a perverse safety in the silence. It was honest, at least. It didn't make promises it couldn't keep. Leo, in turn, burrowed deeper into work, but it had lost its anesthetic quality. The Henderson project spread across his drafting table at home, every line and calculation now seeming to mock him. He would stare at the plans, seeing not a visionary structure, but the blueprint of his own failure, a monument to his absence. The satisfaction of a solved design problem now tasted like ash. He'd glanced down the hall to the closed door of Elara's studio, the strip of light beneath it feeling like a continental divide. The shared rituals that once wove their days together unraveled. Morning coffee was made in separate, terse shifts. The bed, once a sanctuary, was now a vast, cold no-man's land. They slept on the very edges, a canyon of unused sheets between them, both pretending to be asleep long before they were. The silence was a living thing, thick and humming with everything left unsaid. One evening, a week after the explosion at Al Dente, Leo couldn't bear the weight of it any longer. The television flickered with meaningless images, providing a false front of normalcy. He muted it. The resulting quiet was deafening. He watched Elara on the opposite end of the sofa, curled around a book he knew she wasn't reading. She'd been on the same page for 20 minutes. "I don't know how to fix this," he said, his voice rough from disuse, cracking the quiet like thin ice. Elara didn't look up. She slowly closed the book, her finger marking the place she hadn't absorbed. She took a breath that seemed to draw in all the unsaid words of the past week. "You can't fix it by just saying you're sorry this time, Leo," she said, her gaze fixed on the blank television screen. "A sorry is for a broken plate. This is the whole kitchen falling apart. You have to rebuild it." She finally turned her head, and her eyes were not angry, but exhausted and profoundly sad. "And I don't know if you know how. I'm not sure I do either." Her words, delivered not as a dagger but as a simple, devastating diagnosis, landed in the center of his chest. You have to rebuild it. The finality of it, the sheer scale of the labor implied, terrified him. But within that terror, a tiny, stubborn seed was planted. The old ways, the frantic apologies, the rushed bouquets, the grandiose, "I'll make it up to you" promises, were bankrupt. They were the currency of a nation that no longer existed. The next day, during his lunch hour, Leo closed his office door. He stared at his phone, the sunlight glinting off its sleek surface. For months, his thumbs had flown across it, typing out excuses and delays. Now, with a sense of trepidation that felt like stepping off a cliff, he opened his web browser. His search was hesitant, clumsy. "Couples counseling near me" felt too exposing. He tried something else: how to rebuild trust in a marriage after neglect. The articles were clinical, full of phrases like consistent actions and emotional accountability. One name, a Dr. Alicia Evans, kept appearing in local listings, her bio speaking of practical frameworks for relational repair. It wasn't a grand gesture Elara would see. There was no dramatic flourish. It was a quiet, desperate, and profoundly private act. He wrote down the number. He stared at it for a long time, the digits feeling like the first, tremulous line of a new blueprint, one he had no idea how to draft, but knew he must learn. He didn't call immediately. The seed needed time to take root in the barren soil of his regret. But for the first time since the shattering, the silence in his heart wasn't just empty. It was filled with the terrifying, necessary possibility of beginning. Leo's first session with Dr. Evans felt less like a conversation and more like a diagnostic scan of a failing structure. Her office was calm and orderly, with soft lighting and chairs that somehow managed to be both supportive and unforgiving. He sat, feeling like an exposed beam, all his functional exterior stripped away to reveal the shaky core beneath. People often come in wanting to fix the explosion, Dr. Evans began, her voice steady and neutral. But the explosion is just the symptom. We need to look at what made the structure unstable to begin with. Leo found himself nodding, his architect's mind latching onto the metaphor. He described the constant overtime, the missed dinners, the anniversary debacle, painting a picture he himself found damning. "It sounds like you've been very reliable in some ways," she observed, tilting her head. "Providing financially, pursuing career goals. But reliability in a partnership has a specific currency. It's called trust. And right now, from your wife's perspective, that account is in severe deficit." Leo flinched at the word deficit, a term he associated with professional failure. "But I never meant to break my promises," he argued, the defensiveness rising like a reflex. "The intentions were always good. The work was for us, for our future." Dr. Evans nodded, not in agreement, but in acknowledgement. "Intentions are the blueprint, Leo. Trust is the building. And your wife has been living in a building where the doors don't close properly, the windows leak when it rains, and the lights flicker unpredictably. She can't live safely in the blueprint of your good intentions anymore. She needs to live in a solid structure." She reached for a notepad, her pen poised. "Think of trust not as a feeling, but as a practical, buildable thing. It's a structure supported by pillars." She drew 3 quick, strong columns. "The first is predictability," she said, labeling the first column. "This is the foundation. It's doing what you say you will, consistently, in the small things. It's showing up at 6:30, if you say 6:30. It's calling if you'll be late. It's the daily mortar between the bricks. Without it, everything is on shaky ground." Leo's mind raced. He thought of all the running late texts, the postponed weekends, the moved goalposts. He had seen them as necessary adjustments. She had experienced them as structural failures. "The second pillar is vulnerability," Dr. Evans continued, labeling the next column. "This is the strength of the interior. It's the willingness to share your fears, your insecurities, your why, not just your logistics and excuses. It's saying, 'I'm terrified of failing,' instead of just, 'I have to work late.' It allows your partner to see you, not just your function." Leo's throat tightened. He had spent years perfecting his functional exterior. The thought of deliberately exposing the shaky scaffolding beneath felt dangerous. "And the third," she said, finishing the last column, "is empathy, the understanding of impact. This is the roof that shelters you both. It's not enough to know you didn't mean to cause hurt. You have to truly comprehend and hold space for the hurt your actions caused. It's moving from, 'I'm sorry you're upset,' to, 'I understand how my absence made you feel abandoned, and I am so sorry for that.'" The distinction was a revelation. It was a shift from the universe revolving around his intent to an understanding that her experience was the undeniable reality. He had been an architect designing in a vacuum, never visiting the site to see how the building actually stood up to the weather. "Your apologies have been about your blueprint," Dr. Evans said gently, as if reading his thoughts. "But trust is built, or broken, by the lived experience in the building. To rebuild, you must move from being the solo architect to being a dedicated, present construction partner, brick by brick. And the bricks are small, consistent, truthful actions." Leo left the office not with a euphoric sense of solution, but with a sobering, heavy clarity. He held a mental image of the 3 pillars. It was no longer a vague cloud of, "try harder." It was a schematic. For the first time, He saw the colossal scale of the reconstruction needed, but also, for the first time, he saw a path. It was narrow, arduous, and demanded a version of himself he wasn't sure he knew how to be. But it was a path. He walked to his car, the autumn air feeling sharper, more real. The seed of possibility had not just sprouted, it had been given a name, a shape, and a terrifying, necessary job to do. Leo began not with a declaration, but with a silent, internal demolition. He cleared the schedule in his mind, ruthlessly prioritizing the job site of his marriage over all non-essential projects. The first pillar, predictability, was his immediate focus. It felt mechanical, almost embarrassingly simple, but Dr. Evans's words echoed, the daily mortar between the bricks. He sent a calendar invite to Elara for the week. The subject line was plain, my schedule, blocked in unwavering, digital color from 6 p.m. to 10 p.m. every weekday was home. No project name, no client tag, just home. She didn't acknowledge it, but he knew she'd seen it. The first evening, he shut down his computer at 5:15 p.m., the act feeling strangely rebellious. The commute was a nerve-wracking symphony of traffic lights and creeping doubt. He walked through the door at 6:28 p.m., his heart pounding absurdly. Elara was in the kitchen, prepping vegetables. She didn't turn around, but her shoulders tensed slightly at the sound of the lock. I'm home, he said, his voice too loud in the quiet. It was a statement of fact, not an apology. She gave a slight, non-committal nod. It wasn't welcome, but it was notice. It was a brick, rough and unglamorous, placed on the new foundation. The next evening, he was home at 6:25. He didn't retreat to his office with his laptop. Instead, he asked, "Can I help with anything?" Elara, skeptical, handed him an onion to chop. They worked in silence, the only sounds the knife on the board and the sizzle of oil in the pan. It was awkward, charged with the ghost of 1,000 lost conversations. But he was there, present, predictable. Another brick. Saturday morning arrived, the gray light of dawn filtering through the blinds. For months, Leo had used weekend mornings to catch up on work emails, his presence a distracted ghost at the breakfast table. Today, he went to the kitchen and pulled out the large, speckled mixing bowl he hadn't touched in a year. The clatter of pans was deliberate. He found the old, splattered recipe card for buttermilk pancakes, written in his mother's looping script. The ritual of cracking eggs, whisking flour, watching for bubbles, it was a tactile memory of a happier time. The first scent of batter hitting the buttered griddle finally drew Elara out. She stood in the doorway, wrapped in her robe, her expression unreadable. You're making pancakes, she said, a statement laced with confusion and a faint, buried thread of nostalgia. It's Saturday, he replied, as if that explained everything. He flipped one a little clumsily. I thought it's been a while. He didn't look at her, focusing on the task, letting the action speak. He set a stack before her, the way he used to, with the maple syrup she preferred on the side. She ate slowly, cautiously, as if the sweetness might be a trick. It was a small, warm brick of normalcy, placed carefully beside the others. The second pillar, vulnerability, was a far more terrifying construction site. It required him to stand without his professional armor, exposed to the elements. He waited for a quiet moment, when the darkness of their bedroom felt like a confessional. Dr. Evans asked me why I run so hard, he began, his voice a low rumble in the dark. Elara didn't move, but he felt her listening shift from passive to active. I told her about the Henderson project, about career-defining moments. He took a shaky breath. But that's not the real why. He told her about his father, a proud engineer who'd been laid off when Leo was 12. He described the hushed, panicked arguments behind closed doors, the way the laughter had drained from their house, replaced by a tense, precarious silence. I think I've been building a fortress, he confessed, the words raw. I thought if I was indispensable, if I built a career so big and solid, nothing could ever knock it down. I was so busy fortifying the walls, I didn't see I was locking you out. I'm not afraid of hard work, Elle. I'm terrified of failing you. of that silence coming back. The admission hung in the air, fragile and naked. It wasn't an excuse. It was a key, offered up to a door he'd long since barricaded. For a long moment, there was only the sound of their breathing. Then, in the profound dark, Elara's hand found his. Her fingers were cool, her grip tentative at first, then firmer. She didn't say anything. She didn't need to. Her hand in his was an acknowledgement, a bridge over the canyon of sheets. It was the most solid, beautiful brick he had ever laid. He began to practice empathy, the third pillar, in real time. When a late meeting was truly unavoidable, he called at 4 p.m., not 6:45. "I have to stay for this," he'd say. "I know it messes up dinner, and I'm sorry. Would it help if I picked up that Thai food you like on my way?" He was no longer just reporting a delay. He was acknowledging its impact and offering a small, tangible amendment. Slowly, almost imperceptibly, the atmosphere in the apartment began to thaw. The silence lost its hostile, accusing edge and became, at times, merely quiet, a space that could hold possibility, not just pain. Elara's wary glances softened into watchfulness. She started leaving a clean coffee mug out for him in the morning again. One evening, she even asked, "How did the west facade resolution go?" It was a simple question, but to Leo, it felt like being invited back across a threshold he thought he'd burned down. The structure was skeletal, fragile, open to the wind. But for the first time in a long time, when Leo looked at the space between them, he didn't see just ruin. He saw the beginnings of a framework and the quiet, steadfast courage to keep building. The call came for Elara on a Tuesday afternoon, while she was elbow-deep in cerulean blue, painting a seascape that refused to capture the right feeling of light. It was the director of the Silver Pines Artist Residency, a prestigious 2-week program nestled in the mountain pines she had applied to on a hopeful whim months ago, back when dreaming felt like a solitary act. "We had a cancellation," the warm voice said. "The spot is yours, if you can make it. It starts the 14th. The 14th, Leo's Henderson Tower presentation, the culmination of 18 months of work, was on the 15th. It was a conflict so perfectly engineered for disaster it felt like a cosmic test. Her heart hammered, a frantic bird against her ribs. This was everything she'd wanted: uninterrupted time in a studio, critiques from artists she admired, the freedom to let her creativity breathe without the silent weight of a waiting, empty apartment. That evening, she practiced vulnerability, her own version. She didn't hide the offer or present it as a done deal. She laid the printed acceptance email on the kitchen island like a peace treaty or a declaration of war. She wasn't sure which. "It came today," she said, her voice carefully neutral. "Silver Pines. It's 2 weeks. It starts the day before your presentation." Leo picked up the paper. She watched his face, a masterclass in micro-expressions. First, the automatic, professional scan for dates, his engineer's mind mapping the conflict. A flicker of sheer, panicked how. How could she go? How could he manage? How could this happen now? Then, his eyes lifted from the dates to her face, and she saw the internal struggle play out in real time. The old blueprint, the fortress-building instinct, urged him to list the reasons it was impossible, the stress it would cause, the subtle pressure of his unspoken need. But then she saw him take a breath, a conscious, deliberate act. He looked down at the email again, not at the dates, but at the words. Thrilled to offer exceptional talent, a vibrant community of peers, he was reading her blueprint. The silence stretched, thin and taut. He finally put the paper down, his fingers tapping once on the countertop. "You have to go," he said, the words clear and solid. Elara blinked, her prepared defenses momentarily useless. "What?" "This is your Henderson project," he said, a faint, genuine smile touching his lips. "This is it, Elle. The thing you've been building toward in your studio, every day. It's not a hobby. It's your career." He came around the island to stand before her. "I will handle my presentation. You will handle your residency. And we will celebrate both when you get back." She searched his eyes, her artist's gaze looking for the hidden brushstroke of resentment, the faint line of martyrdom. She found only a determined, supportive clarity. He was not just allowing her dream, he was championing it, naming it as equal to his own. This was predictability of a higher order, predictability of respect. It was a massive, load-bearing beam slid into the new structure. The days before her departure were a whirlwind, but a shared one. Leo helped her sort through canvases and tubes of paint. "Will you need the big easel or the travel one?" he asked, practical and engaged. He drove her to the art supply store for last-minute varnish, insisting she get the higher-quality brand. His support was active, not passive. The morning she left, he loaded her bags into the car. At the curb for the airport shuttle, he didn't offer a platitude. He took her hands. "Paint something that scares you," he said. "And text me a picture of it. I'll be your long distance, what do you call it? Patron?" She laughed, a light, free sound that surprised them both. "I will. And you break a leg. Or whatever you say to architects." "Impress the client," he grinned. "Now go." The physical distance was a strange, new element. But instead of the silence of neglect, it became a space actively bridged. True to his word, Leo didn't use his impending presentation as a source of complaint or a bid for her sympathy. His texts were updates, not burdens. Asterisk finished the model walkthrough. The 3D rendering is actually working. Asterisk he'd attach a silly, low-angle photo of his towering physical model, making it look like a kaiju movie. One night, he video called, looking rumpled but energized. "I'm stuck on the closing narrative for the presentation," he said, spinning a pen in his fingers. "I'm too deep in the engineering. You're the storyteller. Help me find the heart of it." It was an invitation into his sanctuary, a reciprocation of vulnerability. For an hour, they talked about the building not as a structure of glass and steel, but as a space for human connection. She helped him find the words to describe how the atrium light would change through the day, painting stories on the walls. He was building a new pattern. Her perspective was not just valued, it was integral. The day of his presentation arrived. Elara, in her sun-drenched mountain studio, felt a nervous flutter entirely for him. She sent a simple text at 9 a.m. her time, noon his, "Thinking of you. They're going to love it." He replied with a single photo, his hand, his wedding band visible, giving a thumbs up next to a corner of his presentation board. She didn't hear from him for 5 hours. The old, wounded part of her braced for the old pattern, the deep immersion that would forget her entirely. But then, as the alpine sunset painted the sky outside her window in hues of rose and gold, her phone lit up. It was a photo of Leo, still in his suit but with his tie completely off, holding a bottle of champagne with 2 colleagues. His smile was one of pure, exhausted triumph. Beneath it, the text, "They loved it." Client signed. The heart of it was the thing. "Thank you. Now go back to your painting. I'm celebrating you, too." Elara put her phone down and looked at her own canvas, a swirling, bold abstraction she had started that morning. It was alive with color and motion, unafraid. She felt a profound shift, as tectonic as it was quiet. He had not just survived her absence during his biggest test, he had thrived and had pulled her into his triumph. The storm hadn't weakened their fragile new structure. The storm had proven it could hold. She picked up her brush, her hand steady, her heart full, and added a streak of solid, brilliant gold right through the center of the composition. The return was not a re-entry, but an arrival somewhere new. Elara stepped off the train 2 weeks later, her mind still humming with the high-altitude clarity of Silver Pines. She was filled with a creative energy that felt like a second pulse, her portfolio case heavy with the weight of new work and new possibilities. The city air smelled of damp concrete and bus exhaust, a stark sensory shift from pine and turpentine. She was braced for a return to the old gravity, the subtle pull of routine and unspoken expectations. When she turned the key and pushed open the door to their apartment, the air that met her was different. It wasn't just clean, it was considered. The windows were open, letting in a fresh, cool breeze that carried the faint, earthy scent of the rosemary plant on the sill, which had been carefully watered. Sunflowers, her favorites, bright, bold, and impossible to ignore, stood in a simple glass vase on the entryway table, their faces turned toward the light. The home was ready, not as a stage for an apology, but as a welcome. Leo emerged from the kitchen, wiping his hands on a dish towel. He wasn't in a suit, but in the old, soft Henley she loved. His smile was easy, unburdened. "Welcome home," he said, and the words were simple, but they held the weight of the 2 weeks of consistent, quiet proof that had preceded them. He took her bag and portfolio, his touch sure. "How was the final critique?" She talked, the words tumbling out in an excited stream about light theory and compositional breakthroughs, and he listened, really listened, asking questions that showed he'd retained every detail she'd shared from before. There was no distracted nodding, no glance toward a silent phone. He was present. It was a living room, not a waiting room. Over a dinner he had cooked, a hearty risotto, because he remembered it was comforting after travel. He told her about the presentation. Not just the victory, but the messy, human details, the moment the projector flickered, the insightful question from the junior intern that had made him think, the immense relief that washed over him not when they signed, but when he saw his team's proud faces. It was a story of shared success, not a solo conquest. He spoke of "we" and the team, his language itself a testament to a shifted perspective. After dinner, he insisted on seeing her work. They spread the canvases and sketches across the living room floor, the vibrant new pieces transforming the familiar space. Leo didn't offer patronizing praise. He knelt, studying them. "This one," he said, pointing to the abstract with the slash of gold. "It feels courageous, like it's not asking for permission." He had seen it. He had seen her in it. The trust that he could hold her dreams, examine them with respect, and understand their language was another profound brick laid. Later, as dusk settled, he suggested a walk. They ended up in the park where he had proposed, under the same ancient oak tree whose branches were now mostly bare. The memories of that night, the nervous fumble with the ring box, her tearful, laughing yes, were sweet, but they belonged to different people. Elara stopped, looking up at the intricate weave of branches against the twilight sky. "It feels different," she said, her breath making a small cloud in the cool air. "Not just being back. The air in her home. It's lighter. It has space in it." Leo turned to face her, his hands in his pockets. "It's not the same as it was," he agreed, his voice thoughtful. "The old trust that was like the foundation of a house we built on inherited land. We assumed it was solid because we loved the view. We didn't know what was underneath." He paused, choosing his words with the care of an architect specifying a vital material. This we built ourselves. We excavated the rotten parts. We mixed the mortar. We laid every single brick, even when it hurt our hands. We know its weight. We know its strength. It's not a gift. It's an achievement." The metaphor resonated in her bones. The old love had been a beautiful, finished house they'd simply moved into. This new understanding was the love of the building, the calloused hands, the solved problems, the shared blueprints stained with coffee and honesty. She looked at him, really looked. She saw the man who had chosen to be predictable when it was boring, vulnerable when it was terrifying, empathetic when his own ego screamed otherwise. She saw not a fixed flaw, but a person committed to the diligent, daily practice of partnership. The foundation was no longer just love, which had never truly vanished, but something more resilient, witnessed effort, proven safety, and a hard-won respect that had depth and texture. "Leo," she said, reaching for his hand. His fingers were warm, curling around hers with a certainty that had been absent for so long. "I trust you." The words left her lips, and for the first time in a long, aching year, they did not feel like a hope, a memory, or a leap of faith. They felt like a fact, a solid, undeniable fact, as tangible as the brick and mortar of the buildings he designed. They were not declaring a finished project. They were affirming the soundness of the structure they now inhabited, a structure they knew how to maintain, repair, and expand. He brought her hand to his lips, his eyes holding hers. "I trust you, too," he said. "And I will keep earning it." Every day, they began the walk back home, not as two people trying to find their way back to a lost path, but as partners walking a new one they had built together. The path was not smooth or perfectly straight. It had the gentle, authentic unevenness of hand-laid stone. Ahead lay the ordinary days, the unexpected storms, the quiet joys. But the silence that might fall between them now would no longer be a void of doubt. It would be the comfortable, fortified silence of a strong shelter, a space where trust, having been built, could finally rest, and from that rest, grow anew.